The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store in Sloan, Nevada, and Harrison Porter knew immediately that something was wrong when the driver climbed down with a face like a thundercloud and didn't bother to help his passenger disembark. Harrison had been waiting 3 months for this moment, ever since he'd sent his letter east and received the careful, proper response from Miss Eleanor Brennan of Boston, agreeing to become his bride. He'd read her words so many times the paper had grown soft at the creases, and he'd memorized the way she described herself as practical, God-fearing, and ready for a new life in the Western Territories. The year was 1882, and mail-order marriages were common enough in Nevada, where men outnumbered women 5-1, and loneliness could eat a man alive faster than the desert sun. Harrison was 26 years old, owned a modest ranch 5 miles outside of Sloan, and had saved every spare dollar to send for a bride who might actually want to build a life with him. But the woman who finally emerged from the stagecoach looked nothing like the hopeful words she'd written. Eleanor Brennan moved like a sleepwalker, her dark dress hanging loose on a frame that seemed to have forgotten how to hold itself upright. Her face was pale as milk, her brown hair pulled back so severely it looked painful, and her eyes were the thing that made Harrison's chest tighten with an unfamiliar ache. Those eyes were empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made a person alive. She stood on the dusty street, a single worn carpetbag at her feet, and didn't even glance around at the town that was supposed to be her new home. The November wind kicked up dust devils around her skirts, but she didn't seem to notice the cold or the stares from the townspeople who'd gathered to see Harrison Porter's bride arrive. Harrison stepped forward, removing his hat. "Miss Brennan, I'm Harrison Porter. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." She turned those dead eyes on him, and for a long moment she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat and mechanical. "Mr. Porter, yes, I am Eleanor Brennan." "I've got the wagon ready to take us out to the ranch," Harrison said, trying to inject some warmth into his words. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and sturdy. I think you'll find it comfortable enough. That will be satisfactory." Eleanor picked up her bag before he could reach for it, holding it against her chest like a shield. The ride out to the ranch was the longest 5 miles Harrison had ever traveled. He tried to make conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the property, the cattle, his plans for expanding the herd come spring. Eleanor sat rigid beside him, her hands gripping the carpetbag, and responded in single words when she responded at all. It was like trying to talk to a stone statue, and Harrison felt his initial hope curdling into something closer to despair. When they reached the ranch, a low adobe structure with a wooden addition Harrison had built himself, Eleanor climbed down from the wagon without waiting for his assistance and stood looking at the house with that same blank expression. "I know it's not what you're used to in Boston," Harrison said, suddenly defensive, "but it's solid. The roof doesn't leak. There's a good well, and I've got chickens for eggs, a milk cow. We won't go hungry. I am sure it will suffice." Eleanor walked toward the door and waited for him to open it. Inside, Harrison had done his best to make the place welcoming. He'd scrubbed every surface until his hands were raw, put fresh linens on the bed in what would be her room, and even picked some late blooming sage to put in a jar on the kitchen table. Eleanor looked at none of it. She stood in the center of the main room, still clutching her bag, and said, "Which room is mine? I'll show you." Harrison led her to the smaller of the 2 bedrooms, the one with the window facing east to catch the morning light. "I thought you might want some time to settle in. I'll be outside tending to the animals if you need anything." Eleanor nodded once and stepped into the room, closing the door firmly behind her. Harrison stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the silence, then walked outside where at least the horses and cattle made sense. Over the next 2 weeks, Harrison learned what it meant to live with a ghost. Eleanor performed her duties mechanically, cooking meals that were edible but joyless, cleaning the house without comment, washing clothes in the wooden tub behind the house. She spoke only when necessary, never smiled, never showed the slightest flicker of emotion. At night she disappeared into her room and didn't emerge until morning. Harrison tried everything he could think of to reach her. He told her stories about growing up in Nevada, about his parents who died of influenza 5 years ago, about his dreams for the ranch. He brought her small gifts, a smooth stone from the creek, a hawk feather, wild flowers that somehow survived in the harsh landscape. Nothing penetrated the wall she'd built around herself. Harrison lay awake at night in his own room, listening to the sounds of the desert and wondering what had happened to break this woman so completely. The Eleanor who'd written those letters, who described her love of reading and her hope for children and a home of her own, that woman had vanished somewhere between Boston and Nevada. What remained was a hollow shell going through the motions of living without any of the substance. It was a rancher named Tom Decker who finally gave Harrison some insight. Tom stopped by one afternoon with a side of venison, and while Eleanor was inside preparing supper, he pulled Harrison aside. "I heard some talk in town," Tom said, his weathered face serious. "About your bride. Seems the stagecoach driver was running his mouth at the saloon." Harrison felt his jaw tighten. "What kind of talk?" Said she barely moved the whole journey. Didn't eat, didn't sleep proper, just sat there staring at nothing. And when they stopped in Salt Lake City, the station master's wife tried to help her, asked if she was all right. Your Eleanor said something about leaving everything behind, about how there was nothing left. Tom shifted his weight. Driver seemed to think maybe she'd had some trouble back east. Bad trouble. Harrison looked toward the house where Eleanor was moving past the window, a shadow among shadows. She doesn't talk to me about anything personal, barely talks at all. Might be she's running from something, or maybe running toward forgetting. Tom clapped Harrison on the shoulder. Give her time. Women are tougher than we give them credit for. She might come around. But time seemed to make no difference. Another week passed, then 2 more. December arrived with cold winds that swept down from the mountains, and Eleanor moved through the house like ice itself, beautiful and untouchable and frozen clear through. Harrison found himself aching in ways he'd never experienced, wanting desperately to help her, but having no idea how. The breaking point came on a gray afternoon when Harrison came in from mending fence to find Eleanor standing at the kitchen window, tears streaming silently down her face. It was the first real emotion he'd seen from her, and it stopped him in his tracks. Eleanor. He said her name softly, afraid of startling her. She didn't turn around. The tears kept falling, but she made no sound, didn't raise a hand to wipe them away. Harrison crossed the room slowly and stood beside her, looking out at the barren winter landscape. "Whatever happened," he said quietly, "whatever hurt you so badly, you don't have to carry it alone. I know we barely know each other, and I know this isn't the life you probably dreamed of, but I want you to know something." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'll mend you with my love if you'll let me, however long it takes, however hard it is. You don't have to be broken forever." Eleanor's breath caught, and she finally turned to look at him. Her eyes, still streaming tears, showed the first spark of life he'd seen since she'd arrived. "You don't know what I've done, what happened to me." "Then tell me." Harrison held her gaze. "Or don't. But either way, I'm not going anywhere and neither are you. We're in this together now." For a long moment, Eleanor just stared at him. Then, in a voice so quiet he had to lean closer to hear, she began to speak. I was engaged in Boston, to a man named Charles Whitmore. He was from a good family, everything my parents wanted for me. I thought I loved him. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the warmth from the stove. 2 months before the wedding, I found him with my younger sister, in our parlor. They were laughing about it, about how foolish I was, how easy I was to deceive. My sister said I was too boring, too plain. Charles said he was only marrying me for my father's business connections. Harrison felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept quiet, letting her continue. I broke the engagement. The scandal was enormous. My parents blamed me, said I should have kept quiet and married him anyway, that my sister was young and foolish and would grow out of it. But I couldn't. I couldn't marry him knowing what I knew. Eleanor's voice cracked. My parents gave me a choice. Marry Charles and they'd forgive my sister, or leave and never come back. So I answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride and left everything I'd ever known. Eleanor, Harrison said, and without thinking he reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. You didn't do anything wrong. You were brave. You chose yourself when everyone else wanted you to disappear. I don't feel brave. The tears were flowing faster now. I feel broken, like someone took everything I was and smashed it to pieces. I don't know how to be anything but this anymore. Harrison squeezed her hand gently. Then we'll find out together, piece by piece. I meant what I said. I'll mend you with my love. Not because I want to fix you like you're some broken tool, but because you deserve to be whole again. You deserve to be happy. Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, and Harrison saw her fingers tighten around his. I don't know if I remember how to be happy. We'll figure it out. Harrison gave her a small smile. I'm pretty stubborn when I set my mind to something. For the first time since she'd arrived in Nevada, Eleanor's lips curved into something that might have been the ghost of a smile. It disappeared almost immediately, but Harrison had seen it, and it gave him hope. That evening, they sat together after supper instead of retreating to separate corners. Eleanor didn't say much, but she stayed in the main room, working on mending one of Harrison's shirts while he repaired a bridle that had cracked. The silence between them felt different now, less like a wall and more like a bridge being slowly built. The next morning, Harrison invited Eleanor to come with him while he checked the cattle. She hesitated, then nodded and wrapped herself in her heavy cloak. They rode out together on Harrison's 2 horses, Eleanor sitting stiffly in the saddle but managing well enough. The Nevada landscape stretched around them, harsh and beautiful, all red rock and scrub brush under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. It's so empty, Eleanor said, the first unsolicited words she'd spoken. That's what I love about it, Harrison replied. Back east, I heard everything is crowded together, people on top of people. Here, you've got room to breathe, room to think. Room to be whoever you want to be without everyone watching and judging. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. In Boston, everyone was always watching. After the scandal, I couldn't go anywhere without people whispering. The church ladies, the shopkeepers, even the servants. They all had opinions about what I should have done, how I should have behaved. Well, there's nobody here but us and the cattle don't care about scandals. Harrison grinned at her, and this time Eleanor definitely smiled back, a real smile that made her whole face transform. I suppose that's true. They spent the morning riding the property line, Harrison pointing out the different landmarks and explaining his plans for the ranch. Eleanor listened, asking occasional questions that showed she was actually paying attention. When they stopped to water the horses at the creek that ran through the eastern section, she surprised him by saying, "You really love this place, don't you?" "I do," Harrison admitted. "It's hard country, but it's honest. You put in the work, you get results. You treat the land with respect, it'll take care of you. There's something pure about that." "I've never thought of land as being honest or pure," Eleanor said, running her fingers along the creek bank. "In Boston, everything was about appearances and social position. Nothing was what it seemed. That's because cities are made by people, and people can be dishonest. But this," Harrison gestured at the landscape around them, "this just is what it is. The desert doesn't pretend to be anything other than the desert." Eleanor looked at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "You see the world very differently than anyone I've ever known. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" She considered the question seriously. "I think it might be a very good thing." They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, and that afternoon, Eleanor made biscuits that actually had flavor, humming quietly to herself as she worked. Harrison watched her from the corner of his eye, afraid to draw attention to the change but grateful for it all the same. Over the following weeks, Harrison saw Eleanor slowly thawing. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but rather a gradual warming, like the sun melting frost 1 degree at a time. She began to speak more freely, sharing small details about her life in Boston, her love of books, her childhood dreams. Harrison told her about growing up on the ranch, about his mother who'd sung while she cooked, and his father who'd taught him that a man's word was the most valuable thing he possessed. They developed routines together. Every morning, they'd have coffee and watch the sunrise. Harrison would tend to the heavy work while Eleanor managed the house and the chickens. But in the afternoons, they'd often ride out together, exploring the property or checking on the cattle. In the evenings, Harrison would read aloud from the books Eleanor had brought with her, novels by Charles Dickens and the Bronte sisters, while Eleanor worked on sewing or knitting. Christmas came, and Harrison surprised Eleanor with a gift he'd ordered from the general store in Sloan, a beautiful leather-bound journal and a fine pen. "I know you said you used to write," he explained, suddenly shy. "I thought maybe you'd like to start again." Eleanor held the journal like it was something precious, running her fingers over the smooth leather cover. "Harrison, this is too much. It's not nearly enough," he said honestly, "but it's a start." Eleanor had made him a thick wool scarf in deep blue, the stitches small and even. "I noticed you didn't have one," she said, "and it gets cold riding out to check the herd." Harrison wrapped the scarf around his neck, touched beyond words that she'd noticed, that she'd cared enough to make something for him. "It's perfect, thank you." They spent Christmas Day together, just the two of them, cooking a small feast and trading stories about holidays past. Eleanor actually laughed when Harrison told her about the time he tried to surprise his parents with breakfast in bed and nearly burned the house down. The sound of her laughter was like music, and Harrison found himself wanting to hear it again and again. As January arrived and the new year of 1883 began, Harrison realized that somewhere along the way, his feelings had shifted from simple compassion to something much deeper. He was falling in love with Eleanor, with her quiet strength, her sharp intelligence, the way she was fighting her way back to wholeness 1 day at a time. He loved the way she concentrated when she read, biting her lower lip slightly. He loved how she talked to the chickens like they were old friends. He loved the rare moments when she'd forget to be guarded and her whole face would light up with genuine joy. But Harrison kept these feelings to himself. Eleanor was still healing, still learning to trust again, and the last thing he wanted was to pressure her or make her feel obligated. Their marriage was legal on paper, but they'd never been intimate, never even kissed. Harrison slept in his room and Eleanor in hers, and that was fine. He'd wait as long as she needed. Eleanor, for her part, was discovering that the frozen place inside her was slowly melting. Harrison's patience, his kindness, his steady presence, these things were teaching her that not all men were like Charles Whitmore. Not all men lied and betrayed. Some men actually meant what they said, kept their promises, cared about something beyond their own advancement. She found herself watching Harrison when he didn't know she was looking. The way he moved, confident and sure. The way he treated the animals with gentle respect. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. She noticed the strength in his hands, the honesty in his gray eyes, the smile that came so easily to his lips. One afternoon in late January, Eleanor was gathering eggs when one of the hens went broody and pecked her hand hard enough to draw blood. She yelped, dropping the basket, and Harrison came running from the barn. "What happened? Are you all right?" He reached for her hand without thinking, examining the small wound with gentle fingers. "I'm fine, just clumsy," Eleanor said, but she didn't pull her hand away. Harrison's touch was warm, careful, and she realized with a start that she liked it. She liked the way his calloused fingers cradled her hand, the way his brow furrowed with concern. "We should clean this," Harrison said, still holding her hand. "Even small wounds can get infected out here." He led her inside and washed the cut with clean water, then wrapped it in a strip of clean cloth. His touch was so tender, so careful, that Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest, the last of the ice around her heart finally breaking free. "Harrison," she said softly, and when he looked up at her, she saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "Thank you." "It's just a bandage," he said, but his voice was rough. "No, thank you for everything, for being patient, for not giving up on me, for keeping your promise." She took a shaky breath. "I was so broken when I came here. I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again, but you showed me that it was possible. You mended me just like you said you would." Harrison's hand tightened around hers. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something. And if it's too soon or if you don't feel the same way, that's all right, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." He met her eyes steadily. "I love you. Not because I'm supposed to, not because we're married on paper, but because of who you are. Your strength, your courage, the way you fought to come back from what happened to you. I love you, and I'll keep loving you whether you can love me back or not." Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes, but these were nothing like the frozen tears she'd cried that first day. These were warm, real, alive. "Oh, Harrison, I love you too. I think I've been falling in love with you for weeks, but I was too afraid to admit it. Afraid it was too soon, afraid I'd be wrong again, afraid of so many things." "Are you still afraid?" Harrison asked gently. Eleanor thought about it, really considered the question. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly I'm just grateful. Grateful that I found you. Grateful that I have a chance at real happiness after all." Harrison stood and pulled her gently to her feet. Then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and Eleanor kissed him back, feeling truly alive for the first time in months. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I've been wanting to do that for a very long time," Harrison confessed. "I've been wanting you to," Eleanor replied, and then they were both laughing, giddy with relief and joy and the sheer wonder of finding each other. That night, they sat together on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars wheel overhead. Harrison had his arm around Eleanor's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth, marveling at how natural it felt. "What do you want from our life together?" Harrison asked. "I know I have plans for the ranch, but this is your home too now. Your dreams matter just as much as mine." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I'd like to have a garden in the spring, flowers as well as vegetables. And maybe we could add a small library room to the house, somewhere to keep books and read on cold days. And someday, when we're ready, I'd like children. A family." She paused. "Is that too much?" "It's not nearly enough," Harrison said, echoing his words from Christmas. We'll have all of that and more. I'll build you the library room myself, and we'll order seeds from the catalog for the biggest garden Nevada has ever seen. And as for children, whenever you're ready, I'll be ready too." "I think I might be ready now," Eleanor said softly. "For all of it. For a real marriage, a real life, with you." Harrison kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and when he pulled back his eyes were bright. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Eleanor stood and held out her hand. "Come to bed, Harrison, my husband." Harrison took her hand and let her lead him inside, into her room. And that night, they finally became husband and wife in every sense of the word. Harrison was gentle and patient, making sure Eleanor felt safe and cherished, and Eleanor discovered that intimacy could be beautiful when it was with someone you loved, someone who loved you back. The next morning, they woke tangled together, and Eleanor felt more at peace than she had in years. Harrison traced patterns on her shoulder and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Porter." "Good morning, Mr. Porter," Eleanor replied and kissed him thoroughly. Over the following months, their life together took on new depth and richness. They were partners in every sense, working side by side to improve the ranch and build their future. Harrison started construction on the library room, carefully framing out a cozy space off the main living area with windows on two sides. Eleanor planned her garden, sketching out plots for vegetables and flowers and herbs. They made regular trips into Sloan for supplies, and the townspeople who'd watched Eleanor arrive so broken now saw a woman transformed, glowing with health and happiness. In March, Eleanor realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks but hadn't wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Harrison, he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy. "We're going to have a baby." He set her down carefully, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Should you be resting? What do you need?" Eleanor laughed at his concern. "I'm fine. I'm better than fine. I'm wonderful. We're going to be parents, Harrison." "I'm going to be a father," Harrison said, wonder in his voice. Then his face grew serious. "I promise you, Eleanor. I'm going to be the best father I know how to be. Our child will never doubt that they're loved." "I know," Eleanor said, touching his cheek. "That's one of the many reasons I love you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Eleanor's garden flourished, and she spent hours tending the plants, talking to the baby growing inside her. Harrison finished the library room and filled it with books ordered from San Francisco, including several about caring for infants that they read together in the evenings. He also built a beautiful wooden cradle, sanding it until the wood was smooth as silk. In September, Eleanor went into labor. Harrison rode hard to Sloan to fetch Mrs. Chen, the midwife who'd helped deliver half the babies in the territory. Mrs. Chen was a practical woman who'd come from San Francisco with her late husband during the mining boom, and she handled the birth with calm efficiency. "You're doing fine," she told Eleanor as the contractions intensified. "This baby is in a hurry to meet you." Harrison stayed by Eleanor's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her how brave she was, how much he loved her. When the baby finally arrived just after midnight, crying lustily, Mrs. Chen announced, "You have a son. A healthy, perfect son." Harrison cut the cord with shaking hands, and then Mrs. Chen placed the baby in Eleanor's arms. They both stared down at the tiny person they'd created, awed and overwhelmed. "He's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He's absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Harrison asked, gently touching one impossibly small hand. They discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Eleanor said, "What about Samuel? It means heard by God. I feel like God heard my prayers, brought me to you, gave us this incredible gift." "Samuel Porter," Harrison said, testing the name. It's perfect. He's perfect. You're perfect. He kissed Eleanor's forehead. Thank you for this, for him, for giving us a family. Mrs. Chen stayed for a few days to help Eleanor recover and to make sure the baby was nursing well. She taught them how to care for Samuel, but mostly she just observed with satisfaction. You two are going to be just fine, she said before she left. That baby is lucky to have parents who love each other so much. Samuel was an easy baby as babies went. He ate well and slept reasonably, and Harrison and Eleanor took turns walking him when he fussed. Harrison would carry his son around the ranch, showing him the horses and cattle, telling him stories about his grandparents and the land they'd loved. Eleanor would sit in the library room and nurse Samuel while reading, or sing him old lullabies her mother had sung to her when she was small. When Samuel was 3 months old, Eleanor received a letter from Boston. It was from her younger sister Margaret, and Eleanor's hands shook as she opened it. The last time she'd had any contact with her family had been when she'd sent a brief note informing them of her marriage, and she'd received no response. The letter was short and painful to read. Margaret wrote that their parents had died in a carriage accident, and Charles Whitmore had married someone else entirely. Margaret herself was engaged to a shopkeeper and wanted to apologize for what had happened years ago. She called herself young and foolish and cruel, and said she hoped Eleanor could forgive her someday. Eleanor read the letter twice, then set it aside and picked up Samuel, holding him close. She felt sad about her parents, but the grief was muted, distant. They'd made their choice and she'd made hers, and now they were gone. As for Margaret's apology, Eleanor found she didn't feel the burning anger she once had. Too much time had passed. Too much had changed. "What is it?" Harrison asked, coming in from the barn and seeing her expression. Eleanor showed him the letter. Harrison read it carefully, then pulled both Eleanor and Samuel into his arms. "I'm sorry about your parents," he said, "and I'm sorry your sister hurt you so badly. Do you want to write back to her?" Eleanor thought about it. "Maybe eventually, but not yet. Right now, I just want to focus on our family, on the life we're building here. The past doesn't have the power to hurt me anymore." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Eleanor smiled up at him. "You mended me, remember? I'm whole now. Nothing that happened in Boston can break me again." Harrison kissed her, careful not to squash Samuel between them. "I love you so much. I love you too." Time passed in the way it does when life is good. Samuel grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. He learned to walk holding onto the fence rails, learned to talk in full sentences that delighted both his parents. Harrison expanded the ranch, buying more land and increasing the herd. Eleanor's garden became famous in Sloan, and she often traded produce for goods in town. The library room became a favorite family gathering place, full of books and comfortable chairs and the sound of laughter. When Samuel was 2 years old, Eleanor became pregnant again. This time she wasn't nervous at all, just excited. She knew what to expect, knew that she and Harrison could handle anything together. Their daughter was born in early summer of 1886. A tiny thing with wispy blonde hair and lungs that could wake the dead. They named her Rose, because Eleanor had planted a rose bush outside the library room window, and it had bloomed for the first time the day she went into labor. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Harrison would hold Rose while Samuel carefully touched her tiny fingers, and Eleanor would watch her family with a heart so full she thought it might burst. "Can you believe this is our life?" she asked Harrison one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching Samuel play with his toy horses while Rose slept in her cradle beside them. "Some days I have to pinch myself," Harrison admitted. "When I sent that letter to Boston, I was just hoping for a partner, someone to share the work and the loneliness. I never imagined I'd find you. I never imagined I could be this happy." "I was so broken when I came here," Eleanor said quietly. "I thought my life was over, that I'd never be anything but empty. And then you promised to mend me with your love, and you actually did it. You gave me everything I'd lost and more." Harrison reached over and took her hand. "We mended each other. You gave me purpose, Eleanor. You gave me a family and a home that's more than just four walls. You made me understand what it means to truly love someone." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Samuel came running over, demanding a story, and Harrison scooped him up while Eleanor checked on Rose. They went inside together, this little family that had been born out of heartbreak and hope, and settled in the library room for the evening. Harrison read from one of Samuel's favorite books while Eleanor nursed Rose, and when the children were both asleep, Harrison and Eleanor stayed up talking quietly about their plans. They wanted to add onto the house again, create more bedrooms for the children to have their own spaces as they grew. Harrison was thinking about buying some horses specifically for breeding, building up a reputation for quality animals. Eleanor wanted to start teaching Samuel his letters, and maybe eventually they could hire a proper teacher to come to the ranch once or twice a week. The years continued to unfold in this way, full of hard work and simple pleasures. Samuel grew tall and strong, learning to ride and rope alongside his father. Rose grew into a bright, cheerful little girl who loved books as much as her mother and could make friends with anyone. In 1889, Eleanor gave birth to twin boys, James and Thomas, who kept everyone on their toes with their energy and mischief. The ranch prospered under Harrison's management. He gained a reputation as an honest dealer and a man whose word was his bond, and buyers came from as far as California to purchase his cattle and horses. Eleanor became known in her own right, for her garden certainly, but also for her kindness. She took in a young woman who'd been abandoned by her family, helped nurse sick children when fever swept through Sloan, taught other ranch wives how to preserve food and manage their households in the harsh climate. Harrison watched Eleanor blossom into this strong, confident woman and felt awed that she was his wife. The broken, frozen woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach was gone completely, replaced by someone radiant with purpose and joy. She still had hard days sometimes, moments when the past would creep up on her, but they were rare and she knew how to handle them now. She'd write in her journal, or take a long walk, or simply come find Harrison and let him hold her until the darkness passed. They'd been married for 10 years when Eleanor received another letter from Boston, this time from Margaret's husband. Margaret had died giving birth to her fourth child, and he was writing to inform Eleanor in case she wanted to know. Eleanor read the letter with tears in her eyes, sad for the sister she'd lost twice, once to betrayal and once to death. She wrote back offering her condolences and a standing invitation for him to visit with the children if he ever found himself out west. He never did, but Eleanor felt better for having offered. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked that night as they lay in bed together. "Leaving Boston, coming out here to marry a stranger, not for a single second," Eleanor said firmly. "My life in Boston was a beautiful prison. This life here with you, this is freedom. This is everything I never knew I wanted. I love you, Eleanor Porter. I love you, Harrison Porter." They made love slowly, tenderly, still as passionate about each other as they'd been in those early days. Afterward, Eleanor curled against Harrison's side, listening to his heartbeat, and felt profoundly grateful for the chain of events that had brought her to Nevada, to this ranch, to this man. By 1893, Samuel was 11 and already proving himself invaluable on the ranch. Rose was 8 and reading books meant for children twice her age. The twins were 4 and into absolutely everything. Eleanor had started teaching all of them formally in the library room every morning, using books and slates she ordered from San Francisco. Harrison built Eleanor a greenhouse so she could grow things year-round, and she spent happy hours there, teaching Rose about plants and patience. The ranch now covered 5,000 acres and supported 200 head of cattle plus a growing horse breeding operation. They'd hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, good men who lived in a bunkhouse Harrison had built near the barn. Life wasn't always easy. There were droughts that tested their resources, winters that were brutally cold, losses of livestock to disease or predators. But Harrison and Eleanor faced every challenge together, supporting each other, never letting hardship drive a wedge between them. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Eleanor by taking her into Sloan for dinner at the new hotel restaurant. It was rare for them to have time alone, and they dressed in their finest and rode into town feeling like young courting couple. Over dinner, Harrison pulled out a small box. "I know we don't really do fancy things," he said, suddenly shy, "but I wanted you to have something special. Something that shows what you mean to me." Eleanor opened the box to find a delicate gold locket. She opened it and saw tiny portraits inside, Harrison on one side and all 4 children on the other. "Harrison, it's beautiful. When did you have these made?" "I took photographs into Carson City last time I sold horses there. The jeweler said he could paint miniatures from them. I wanted you to be able to carry all of us with you always." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You sentimental fool, I love it, I love you." She stood and kissed him right there in the restaurant, not caring who saw. They walked through town afterward, hand in hand, greeting neighbors and friends. Everyone in Sloan knew the Porters, respected them, liked them. They were part of the community now, woven into the fabric of the town's life. "You know," Eleanor said as they drove back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, "sometimes I think about that day I arrived. How scared I was, how empty. If someone had told me then that 15 years later I'd be this happy, this fulfilled, I wouldn't have believed them." "I knew," Harrison said. "Maybe not that first day, but soon after. I looked at you and I saw strength hiding under all that hurt. I saw potential. I saw someone worth fighting for." "You saw me when I couldn't see myself," Eleanor said softly. "You kept your promise, Harrison. You mended me with your love, and you gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." They reached the ranch to find the children all still awake despite it being late. Samuel had let them stay up, and they'd made a surprise for their parents, a cake that was slightly lopsided but made with love. The whole family gathered around the kitchen table, eating cake and laughing, and Eleanor looked at each face, these people who were her whole world. Samuel, growing into a fine young man, responsible and kind like his father. Rose, brilliant and curious, always asking questions and seeking answers. James and Thomas, wild and funny, keeping everyone entertained. And Harrison, her husband, her partner, the man who'd saved her without even knowing how much she needed saving. "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked, catching her expression. "I'm thinking I'm the luckiest woman alive," Eleanor said. "I'm thinking that coming to Nevada was the best decision I ever made. I'm thinking that I would live through all that pain again if it meant ending up here with you, with this family." Harrison raised his glass of milk since they didn't keep spirits in the house. "To family," he said. "To family." Everyone echoed and they all drank. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Samuel eventually married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, a smart young woman named Lucy who fit right into the family. They built a house on the northern section of the ranch and started their own herd. though Samuel still worked closely with Harrison. Rose went away to San Francisco for 2 years to attend a women's college, then came home with modern ideas about ranching and agriculture that she and Harrison implemented together. The twins grew into tall, strong young men who took over the horse breeding operation and expanded it significantly. Harrison and Eleanor aged together gracefully, their love only deepening with time. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching the family they'd created spread and flourish. The ranch that Harrison had built alone became the Porter family ranch, a legacy for generations to come. In 1912, 30 years after Eleanor had arrived in Sloan, she and Harrison celebrated their anniversary by riding out to the creek where they'd had one of their first real conversations. They were both in their 50s now, hair gray and faces lined, but they could still sit a horse and they still held hands like newlyweds. "You remember the first time we came here?" Eleanor asked, dismounting and walking to the water's edge. "You told me the desert was honest because it didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was." "I remember," Harrison said, joining her. "You looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. In a way, you were. Everything you said was so different from how I'd been taught to see the world. But you were right. This place is honest. And it gave me the freedom to be honest too, to be myself without apology." They sat on the bank, watching the water flow past, and Harrison put his arm around Eleanor's shoulders. "I love you just as much today as I did 30 years ago," he said. "More, actually. I didn't know it was possible to love someone more than I loved you then, but every day proves me wrong." "I used to be frozen," Eleanor said quietly. "Frozen and broken. But you melted all that ice, Harrison. You mended every crack. You made me whole again, and then you made me more than I ever thought I could be." "We made each other," Harrison said. "That's what love is supposed to do. Make both people better, stronger, more themselves." They sat there for a long time, comfortable in the silence, watching the sun move across the sky. Eventually they rode back to the ranch, where their children and grandchildren were gathering for a big family dinner. The house they'd built together was full of noise and laughter, multiple generations of Porters all together. Eleanor stood in the library room, the room Harrison had built for her all those years ago, and watched her family through the window. Samuel was teaching his oldest grandson to rope. Rose was showing her daughter the greenhouse, pointing out different plants. The twins were arguing good-naturedly about something while their wives rolled their eyes affectionately. Children ran everywhere, playing and shouting. Harrison came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how far we've come," Eleanor said, leaning back against him. "About how a woman who'd given up on everything found a man who promised to mend her with his love, and how he actually kept that promise. About how that broken woman and that determined man built all of this together." "Best thing I ever did was send that letter to Boston," Harrison said. "Best thing I ever did was answer it," Eleanor replied. They stood together, watching their family, the family that had started with a desperate woman on a stagecoach and a lonely rancher who'd seen past her brokenness to the strength beneath. A family built on patience and kindness and love that had proven stronger than pain. The sun set over the Nevada desert, painting everything in shades of gold, and Eleanor felt Harrison's arms tighten around her. She turned in his embrace and kissed him. This man who'd saved her life by simply loving her. This man who'd kept his promise every single day for 30 years. "I love you, Harrison Porter," she said. "I love you, Eleanor Porter," he replied. And in that moment, surrounded by the family they'd created and the life they'd built, both of them knew that every hardship had been worth it. Every struggle had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Eleanor had arrived in Nevada frozen and broken, but she was leaving this life whole and happy, loved beyond measure, having loved just as fiercely in return. The Wild West had been harsh and unforgiving in many ways, but it had also given them something precious: the space and freedom to become who they truly were, both separately and together. Harrison had promised to mend Eleanor with his love, but the truth was they'd mended each other, built something beautiful together from the broken pieces of their solitary lives. As darkness fell and the stars came out, the Porter family gathered on the big front porch Harrison had expanded over the years. Someone started singing, and others joined in, voices blending in harmony. Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, holding Harrison's hand, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and knew with absolute certainty that this was what happiness looked like. This was home. This was love. This was the life she'd never dared to dream of, given to her by a cowboy who'd looked at a frozen, broken woman and seen someone worth saving. Harrison had mended her with his love, and together they'd built a legacy that would last for generations. The mail-order bride who'd arrived with nothing had gained everything, and the lonely rancher had found the family and love he'd always wanted. Their story, born out of pain and hope, had become something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the healing power of patience, kindness, and true love. And as Eleanor looked around at all the people who existed, because she'd been brave enough to board that stagecoach and Harrison had been steadfast enough to keep his promise, she knew that every moment of heartbreak had been worth it to arrive at this perfect ending.